On October 23, 2025, a significant legal decision was handed down in the United Kingdom. It directly challenges the way one of the world's most powerful companies does business. The UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal, or CAT, ruled against Apple. The court found that the company had abused its dominant market position. This abuse centered on the commission fees it charged to developers on its popular App Store. The lawsuit, a class action, was brought on behalf of approximately 20 million users in the United Kingdom. iPhone users, iPad users. It is a case with a staggering potential value, seeking up to £1.5 billion in damages. This ruling represents a major victory for developers and consumer advocates. The case was first filed back in 2021. It was led by Dr. Rachel Kent, a respected academic from King's College London. The lawsuit argued that Apple's strict policies created an unfair marketplace. Specifically, it claimed that by forcing developers to use its own in-app purchase system, Apple could impose excessive fees. The Competition Appeal Tribunal's judgment was clear and direct. It found Apple holds near absolute market power over app distribution on iOS. This powers all iPhones. This powers all iPads. The tribunal concluded developers have no realistic alternative to the App Store. The court said this control extends to in-app payments. Apple's rules created a closed ecosystem controlling app sales and payment processing. That left developers with no other choice. With dominance established, the tribunal ruled Apple had abused it. The abuse took two primary forms. First, Apple shut out competition for distributing apps to iOS users. By making the App Store the sole gateway, it blocked competing app stores and alternative terms. Second, Apple used its monopoly to charge excessive and unfair prices. These were the commissions levied on developers. The tribunal saw the 30% commission not as market-driven, but as an overcharge enabled by Apple's control. The court's language was strong. It dismantled Apple's claim that the App Store is just a marketplace providing services. The legal journey that culminated in this landmark ruling was a long one. The class action was filed in 2021 by Dr. Rachel Kent. But complaints from developers had been building for years. The tribunal's findings cover October 2015 through the end of December 2020. That time frame precedes a key Apple policy change. During that period, the standard 30% commission was widely applied. There were few exceptions for smaller developers. The end date aligns with Apple introducing the App Store Small Business Program. The program reduced the commission from 30% down to 15%. It applied to developers earning less than $1 million a year. The lawsuit focused on years before the program. During that 5-year window, developers of all sizes faced the same high rate. The lawsuit argued this showed an uncompetitive market. The legal process moved methodically through the UK courts. The case underwent procedural stages to be certified as a class action. Key milestone, pre-trial review on November 15, 2024. That hearing finalized preparations. Trial commenced January 13, 2025. It ran for over 6 weeks, concluding on February 28, 2025. Both sides presented extensive evidence and expert testimony. Evidence addressed market dynamics. Evidence covered costs. Evidence covered competitive effects. The tribunal then took several months to deliberate. Judges weighed Dr. Kent's claims against Apple's defense. Finally, on October 23, 2025, the tribunal delivered its judgment. The 4-year journey highlights the complexity and high stakes. It underscores the persistence required from claimants. At the heart of this legal dispute was the question of fairness. The core of the complaint against Apple was its commission structure, which for years mandated that many developers hand over 30% of their revenue from paid apps in-app purchases. The lawsuit argued this was not a fee for a service, but a tax imposed by a monopolist. The tribunal ultimately agreed with this view. It determined that the commission Apple charged was excessive and unfair. The court went a step further and provided a specific figure for a fair rate. The Competition Appeal Tribunal estimated a fair commission rate for 2015 to 2020. It concluded 17.5% would have been appropriate for app purchases in a competitive market. This figure is substantially lower than the 30% that was standard practice. The difference between 17.5% and 30% forms the basis of the overcharge. The overcharge is the amount the tribunal believes Apple unfairly extracted due to lack of competition. The tribunal's calculation provides a clear mathematical foundation for damages. For every £100 of revenue, developers were overcharged by £12.5. When that amount is multiplied across the vast number of transactions over 5 years, the total becomes enormous. This is how the claim reaches its potential value of up to £1.5 billion. This specific finding is a major blow to Apple's justification for its fees. The company says the 30% covers technology, security, global distribution platform of the App Store. However, the tribunal suggests a significant portion of that fee was instead pure monopoly profit. By putting a number on a fair commission, the court has given regulators and plaintiffs elsewhere a powerful tool. The tribunal's ruling detailed a clear chain of economic harm that started with Apple but did not end there. The primary victims of the overcharge were the app developers themselves. These creators, ranging from small independent studios to larger companies, were forced to accept Apple's terms if they wanted to sell their products to iPhone and iPad users. The excessive commission directly reduced their revenue, leaving them with less money to invest in their businesses. This meant less funding for new features, less capacity to hire more staff, and ultimately a diminished ability to innovate and compete in the app economy. The financial pressure created by the 30% commission had a stifling effect on the market. For many developers, particularly smaller ones, this high fee could be the difference between a sustainable business and a failed one. They were caught in a difficult position: raise their prices to cover the commission, which could drive away customers, or absorb the cost and operate on razor-thin margins. Use marketing image. This lack of flexibility hindered the growth of many United Kingdom-based technology businesses. The tribunal's finding validates the long-standing complaints from the developer community that Apple's policies were extracting disproportionate value from their work. Crucially, the tribunal did not see developers as the only victims. The court also ruled on how this overcharge affected the end users, the consumers. According to the judgment, developers passed on approximately 50% of the unfair commission cost to their customers. This means that UK consumers were directly paying higher prices for apps and for in-app purchases, like game upgrades or subscriptions, than they would have in a fair and competitive market. The financial burden was shared, with developers absorbing half the hit and passing the other half along to the millions of people who use Apple devices every day. This finding transforms the case from a business dispute into a consumer rights issue. It connects Apple's corporate policy directly to the wallets of ordinary people. The 20 million iPhone and iPad users included in the class action are now recognized by the court as having been financially harmed. This is why the lawsuit was brought on their behalf. The potential £1.5 billion in damages is intended not just to penalize Apple, but to compensate the consumers who, for 5 years, paid an inflated price because of the company's anti-competitive practices. It reframes the debate around the real-world cost of a tech giant's market dominance. Throughout the legal proceedings, Apple mounted a vigorous defense and presented several key arguments to justify its 30% commission and its exclusive control over app distribution. One of its central claims was that its strict rules and review process were essential for maintaining user security and privacy. Apple argued that by managing every aspect of the App Store, it could protect users from malware scams, fraudulent apps. It positioned the Commission as the price for creating and maintaining this safe and trusted ecosystem, a service that benefits users and developers. However, the Competition Appeal Tribunal did not find this argument convincing enough to justify the high fees and restrictive practices. While acknowledging the importance of security, the court was not persuaded that Apple's specific commission level or its ban on competing app stores were necessary to achieve that goal. The ruling implies that security could be maintained without charging what the court deemed to be an excessive price. The tribunal rejected the idea that safety and fair competition were mutually exclusive, suggesting Apple could provide a secure platform without extracting monopoly rents from developers. Another major pillar of Apple's defense was that it does not operate in a monopoly. The company contended that the app market is highly competitive. It pointed to Google's Android platform as a viable and powerful alternative for developers and consumers. Apple's lawyers argued developers were free to build for Android, and consumers could buy Android phones instead of iPhones. According to Apple, this competition from Android disciplined its behavior and prevented monopoly. This argument was flatly rejected by the tribunal. The court found that, for distributing apps to iOS users, Apple does hold a monopoly. It determined that Android and other platforms were not effective substitutes. A developer wanting to reach millions of iPhone users in the UK has no choice but to go through Apple's App Store. A consumer who has already invested in the Apple ecosystem with an iPhone is unlikely to switch to Android simply because of app prices. The tribunal concluded Apple has a captive audience and a captive market of developers, near absolute market power within iOS. This UK tribunal decision did not happen in a vacuum. It is a significant part of a much larger global wave of regulatory and legal scrutiny directed at Apple and other major technology companies. For years, antitrust authorities and lawmakers around the world have been investigating the immense power wielded by big tech. The ruling in London is one of the most concrete legal victories for critics of these companies, and it aligns with actions being taken in other major jurisdictions, including the European Union and the United States. These parallel efforts suggest a growing international consensus that the dominance of tech giants needs to be addressed. For instance, in the European Union, regulators have been using the Digital Markets Act to force changes upon companies like Apple. In April 2025, the European Commission fined Apple €500 million. The Commission ruled that Apple had violated the Digital Markets Act by preventing developers from steering users to alternative payment options outside the App Store. This practice, known as anti-steering, is a key way Apple maintains control over its payment system and commissions. While Apple appealed that decision in July 2025, it shows that European regulators are actively working to pry open Apple's closed ecosystem. Across the Atlantic, the United States government is also taking action. In March 2025, the Department of Justice, along with 16 state and district attorneys general, filed a major civil antitrust lawsuit against Apple. The lawsuit accuses the company of illegally monopolizing smartphone markets through a variety of tactics, including its restrictive App Store policies. This case, like the UK one, argues that Apple's control over its platform harms competitors, stifles innovation, and ultimately hurts consumers. The coordinated legal pressure from both the European Union and the United States demonstrates a broad international front against Apple's business practices. The UK ruling, therefore, adds powerful legal precedent to this global movement. It is the first case of its kind to go to a full trial and win under the UK's class action system, showing that such challenges can succeed. It will likely be studied closely by regulators and plaintiffs in other countries. The finding that a 17.5% commission would have been fair, for example, could be cited in other lawsuits. The decision strengthens the overall narrative that the rules governing digital markets need to be reformed to promote greater competition and fairness for developers and consumers everywhere. Apple's reaction to the tribunal's decision was swift and unambiguous. The company immediately announced its intention to challenge the ruling. In a public statement, Apple expressed its strong disagreement with the court's conclusions. A spokesperson stated, "We thank the tribunal for its consideration, but strongly disagree with this ruling, which takes a flawed view of the thriving and competitive app economy." This response signals that the company is prepared for a prolonged legal fight and has no intention of accepting the judgment without exhausting all avenues of appeal. The battle over the App Store is far from over. The company's statement reiterated its long-standing defense of the App Store. Apple maintains that its platform has been a force for good, creating a dynamic marketplace that has benefited both businesses and consumers across the United Kingdom. It highlighted the millions of innovative apps available to users and the economic opportunities it has created for developers. By describing the app economy as thriving and competitive, Apple directly contradicts the tribunal's core finding that it abused a monopoly position. The company fundamentally believes that the court has misinterpreted the market and failed to appreciate the value the App Store provides. The next immediate step in the legal process is a hearing scheduled for next month. This hearing will address two critical issues. First, it will begin the process of determining how the damages should be calculated and distributed to the affected class of consumers. This will involve complex economic modeling based on the tribunal's findings about the overcharge. Second, and more importantly for Apple, the hearing will consider the company's formal application for permission to appeal the ruling. Apple will need to convince the court that there are valid legal grounds to challenge the decision in a higher court. An appeal, if granted, would significantly extend the timeline of the case. The legal arguments would be re-examined by the Court of Appeal, a process that could take many months or even years to resolve. During this time, the original ruling would be on hold, meaning Apple would not be required to pay damages or change its business practices based on this specific judgment. Apple's strategy is clear: to fight the decision on legal principle and delay any financial or operational consequences for as long as possible. The company is betting that a higher court might take a different view of the law and the evidence. The UK Tribunal's ruling against Apple is a watershed moment, but it is the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of the story. The immediate future will be dominated by legal procedure. All eyes will be on the upcoming hearing to see how damages will be assessed, and, crucially, whether Apple is granted permission to appeal. If an appeal proceeds, the final resolution could still be years away. This legal uncertainty means concrete changes to the UK App Store from this case are not imminent. Developers will need to watch and wait. Consumers will need to watch and wait. For developers in the UK, for developers in the European Union, the ruling is a massive symbolic victory that could eventually lead to tangible benefits. If the verdict is upheld after appeals, it could force Apple to pay substantial damages to consumers, which would validate the financial harm developers have suffered. More importantly, it could compel Apple to lower its commission rates, allow for more competition in payment processing. This would increase developer revenue and could lead to lower app prices for consumers. The decision empowers developers and may give them more leverage with the platform holder. For Apple, the ruling is a significant threat to its services business. The App Store is a cornerstone of that strategy. While Apple will fight this UK ruling vigorously, it faces a broader global challenge. Pressure is mounting from regulators in the European Union. Pressure is also mounting from regulators in the United States. Apple may be forced to make systemic changes to its App Store policies worldwide. The company is at a crossroads. It can continue to fight each battle individually, or it can strategically reform its business model for a more open digital marketplace. This case is about more than commission rates. It's about defining the rules of the road for the 21st century digital economy. The tribunal's decision suggests a shift in power away from tech giants and toward creators and consumers who make the platforms valuable. The likely next steps involve a lengthy appeals process, but the precedent has been set. Market power, fair competition, rights of consumers. will be debated in courts and legislatures around the globe, shaping the future of technology for years to come.